Caldiero 1796, la prima sconfitta di Bonaparte, or Bonaparte's first defeat. This is a game that comes with the latest and second issue of the Parabellum magazine, a war game magazine published in Italy. The text is in Italian, the instructions to the game are in Italian, but you can find English rules online. Also, you have a player aid which comes in 2 languages, so the game is definitely playable by players that do not speak Italian but that understand English. Caldiero is a game about an episode, a small battle of the Italian campaign of Napoleon, in which Napoleon was attempting to take the Caldiero stronghold. In truth, it was a fortified villa, and that didn't go so well, also partially because of the weather that was particularly harsh that day. And so it was Napoleon's first official defeat. And in this case, we have a 2-player game, the French versus the Austrians. It can be played by 2 players, of course, but also it can be played in solitaire by a single player playing both sides at the best of their possibilities. There are 3 main type of units. You have leaders that have an initiative rating and a range up to which they can project their orders. Then we have infantry, and the numbers that you see here are efficiency, strength, and movement. Here you see a ladder that indicates the group that they belong to, the formation. For example, these are led by Provera. Also, if you're familiar with games of the Bataille system, system for Napoleonic conflict, you may recognize the design. It looks to me like the design of the counters was inspired by by the counters of that system. That is nice because those counters look nice, and so do these. Here we have artillery. Here artillery. Artillery has a moved side because in the game artillery units can move or fire in a turn, not both. So after you move an artillery piece, you flip it to its moved side. We also have cavalry. We also have cavalry units somewhere. I can't find them right now. Trust me, they are somewhere there in the game. Here you have the map of the game. It is printed on paper, as you can expect from a magazine game. Here we have the turn track. Here we have the weather track. Again, the weather was particularly important, and so as the day progresses, chances are that the game will, the weather will become very bad, all the way maybe up to ice storm, in which case the game pretty much freezes. No pun intended. The worse the weather, the more the limitations of the players are, and it can get to a point where players won't be able to do pretty much of anything. Later in the game, the weather may turn out to improve a little bit, but it is possible that the game will end prematurely, functionally at least, because the weather just gets so bad and doesn't get better. As you can see here, you have some modifiers. In game turns from 2 to 6, when you roll for weather at the beginning of each turn, you will have on a 1 to 3 no effect. 3 to 6 the weather worsens by 1 on this track here. Later from turn 7 to 10 there is 50% chances that it will stay as bad as it is, or that it will go down 1 level. But again, weather in the second part of the game, central and second part of the game, can be very, very powerful, which may make the game very accurate, but also a little frustrating as players won't be able to do much. On this side of the board, you have a track for the Elan. There are 4 times in the game in which the French player can spend an Elan point to try to get a shift on the combat table, a shift of several columns, but it's a risky proposition. Pretty much roll a die, you take a test, and if you pass it, you get 1d6 shifts, which is amazing, can be really powerful, but also there's a chance that actually the unit that is trying to use a land will become disorganized. Here we have command boxes. All units will be under 1 of 4 orders at all times, and this is pretty fun. I like games that use command system. Here the 4 possible orders are defense, maneuver, advance, and attack. Like games that pretty much all games that use orders, these are games that are better played by players that are in the right spirit, not that they want to game the system. Usually there are ambiguities that you can exploit to try to get the most out of of playing the letter of the orders. That usually is not that fun. I mean, just if you like a game which is just all about the system, play chess, please. Don't play an historical game. It is about exploring the historical situation and seeing what would have made sense for people to do under the circumstances. So here you will have commanders. Each commander is represented by 2 markers. One goes on the board to represent the actual location of the commander, and then you have a matching commander, like you have a commander marker, like here you have for the Hohenzollern, that is placed in one of the order boxes to represent the order that that commander is issuing to the people in his formation. And the same applies here for Massena, who has a token there and a token there. Units that are in the range of a commander with a certain order must abide to that order. Units under a defense order must try to stay in the location that they are in. They try to defend the place, hence the name of the order, and they cannot move more than 1x. Maneuver, they can move wherever the heck they want, but not in enemy zones of control. Each unit projects a zone of control in the 6 hexes surrounding it, and so it's good for moving people fast next to where the battle is, but not in the thick of battle exactly. Advance, at least half of the units of a formation that are under an advance order must move towards an enemy, and also they can enter zones of control, and they can even launch an assault. Attack, all units in that formation must move towards enemy units and try to attack if possible. Here actually the attack order is less restrictive than in other cases. You have to at least move towards an enemy, and you can, if you want, attack with everybody. So who follows orders and when? Well, at the beginning of a turn, pretty much you have a phase where you have several functions that need to be performed, such as controlling the weather, taking care of the weather, etc., etc. Then you have the supreme leader. The supreme leader may change orders, may change the orders of the generals, and then the generals in turn will project the received order up to their command range. The commander themselves, if the leader is not around, may try to change their own order. You roll a die and you're trying to pass an efficiency test. Units that are not in range usually are under a defense order, but again, you can try to change that order. So there is a certain momentum, there is a certain element, of course, of units not always doing what you, the human player, would want them to do, which is one of the elements that makes the game appealing and definitely playable for the solitaire player, precisely because there is a degree of uncertainty that results from that element. After you're taking care of all the upkeep, various phases at the beginning, that kind of stuff, again, weather, orders, bringing in reinforcements, replacements, that kind of stuff, you start rolling for initiative. This is a game that has an unusual system of initiative. The not unusual part is that players will roll dice and use modifiers to determine who has the initiative. The French player always has a modifier +2. The Austrian player has a modifier that changes depending on the weather. The player that has initiative decides which formation, their own or the opponent's, activates next, and that's an unusual thing. Not so much. Again, not the most unusual. The most unusual thing is that after the formation that was just activated activates, moves, possibly attacks, etc., etc. After that formation activated, players don't alternate. Again, in other games, the player with the initiative decides who goes first, and then you alternate a formation per player. What happens here is that after the formation that was selected by the initiative player activates, players roll again for initiative again, and then the player that wins the initiative again decides who goes next. So it's entirely possible that all of your units will go because I want the initiative and I want them all to go. I want you to spend them all. That again creates a very fluid situation, a lot of uncertainty, and again it works very well from the point of view of the solitaire player. When a formation is activated, then they move. They can use the artillery that did not move. They can be used to attack. If they are under an order that allows for moving next to enemy units, they can do just so. And in some cases, they may choose to attack. In other cases, may be forced to attack. In any case, when you resolve combat, you have two main types of combat. You have bombardment. You have bombardment and melee, that is adjacent combat. For bombardment, fairly simple. Different units may combine their strength points. So when you have organized and declared a bombardment, that is an attack with artillery, you check the total strength of the attack that you're performing, you roll a die, apply modifiers based on efficiency, disorder, terrain, etc., etc. And then, sorry, the modifiers are here. That's a strange for bombardment. These are the modifiers, strength points. For example, target density. I like this. I like this when in a game about this epoch there is a modifier that makes it easier to hit when you are when you're fighting against a hex that has a lot of enemy strength points. The instance in excess. Cross-reference the strength of the attack with the die roll and see what the effects are, and the unit and the defender may have to undergo these effects here. As for melee combat, which again is declared by adjacent units, and again they can combine their strength, you compare the strength of the attack with the defender, turn it into a ratio 1:1, 2:1, 1.5:1. You apply possible modifiers, there you go, and again roll a die, cross-reference and see what happens. And these are the possible results. Attacker or defender eliminated, attacker or defender disorder, which of course will give you all sort of penalties. No effects, exchange, good old exchange result from the good old days of SPI. There were games in that by that publisher they used to exchange a system as a way of inflicting damage, and not used very often since nostalgic game this one is. And then the all defending combat units must retreat 1x and check efficiency, and then they may disorder or they may even rout. An interesting element about being eliminated, you're not out of the game entirely. The unit is removed from the game, yes it is, but if it is two-sided, it is placed on its reduced side on the turn track. One turn ahead if the unit was eliminated within command range of a commander, 2 turns ahead if it was out of range. And so the unit will come back. Then if a reduced unit is hit again, it is eliminated. And I like that. I like the fact that yes, they look like they're disappearing, but in truth they're just regrouping in the backlines and trying to put themselves together. This is pretty much the general idea, the general flow of the game. When the game starts, the Austrians will be defender the areas that you see outlined here, indicated by those flags. The French are coming from there. During the game, reinforcements will pour in from here for the Austrian player and from there for the French player. And so they will be fighting it out here in the central area, again, at least until things may reach a standstill because of the weather, or because everybody has the wrong orders. Point is, the players are trying to fight for control of key locations on the board. This is a victory point area. Here we have a victory point area. Here there are 2 mountains that also are victory point areas. So you play, and that one too is important for victory points. You play until the end of the game, and then you determine victory based on victory points that are assigned to players based on the control of who has victory condition, who controls victory locations on the map. That's what I was trying to say. It wasn't hard to say, but maybe it was because I didn't say it the first time. Caldiero 1796 is a magazine game, and we know that from the fact that, heck, it comes with a magazine. But I would almost say if we didn't know that, we could almost figure it out, at least those of us that are familiar with this type of game. It is almost a quintessential magazine game, with all the advantages and of course also some of the specific limitations of this format, of this style of game. One of the advantages of magazine games is that very often they can explore very specific, somewhat obscure, very small engagements, very small topics that would hardly justify a box set, a full game. It would be much harder to sell a whole game just based on maybe one specific thing. And so precisely here, like we have here, I didn't know anything about the Battle of Caldiero, and now I'm glad that I do. Now I'm glad that I got the opportunity of exploring this topic that I was not familiar with, and maybe it would have been hard to find a set just about this to justify the expense, get it shipped to you, etc., etc. Whereas here I get a magazine, I get to read the article, I get to read the other articles in the magazine, and then I also had this thing. So the fact that there's a combination of magazine and game makes it easier, makes it, I would say, to sell the battle as part of a set. Like most magazine games, Caldiero is very approachable in terms of rules. It's simple, it's very light, it's possible to play it even if you are a beginner or gamer. Actually, I would almost say if you're a beginner or gamer and you're unfamiliar with the idea of orders, and there are many games that use order systems, and I like that type of game very much. This could be a good introduction to that style, because you have orders, but the orders are very simple, very intuitive. Changing orders is still pretty simple. There are the games that use that on much higher levels of sophistication, and if you're just moving from a basic small victory point introductory war game to like a full-flash multi-layered order system, that can be a little overwhelming. So this could be good for that. So I find it to be a good entertaining introductory game, a good entertaining game that can introduce somebody to the order system, and a good introduction to the topic, a good way of exploring the topic in an interactive fashion. I didn't know about the battle, and now not only do I know it, but I read the article, I play the game, I'm sure that now I will remember the basic of the battles, the dynamics, the mechanics, for maybe as long as I live, because when I play a game about something, that is when I really get to see things from the perspective of the actors, or the people that were there, and that is when the content, the idea, the dynamics of the event really get buried deep. I get the sense that they sink in deep. As for some of the limitations of the system, of course, the fact that the game is very specific, very historical, and about a small engagement means that gameplay doesn't feel like it has a lot of options. It's a little limited. It's a specific event, you have a larger map, but you only have specific areas that the units will use to enter the board, and so in many cases you will want to go for the most direct direction to go and take or defend the objectives for which you're fighting. And yes, there's a possibility of some maneuvers out there, but nothing too creative, nothing too spectacular, because those are the objectives and it's about holding them and or taking them. So both the entry point of the reinforcements and replacements and the victory point system based on victory locations will direct gameplay towards certain directions, towards certain specific lines. And because of that also, replay value is not enormous. I would say it's fairly limited. And again, that is what I expect from a magazine game. I read the article, I play the game once or twice, I get to understand the article better, I get to understand history better, I had fun while I was doing it. I know I will not be engaged if I play it many more times, but I never expected you to be able to do so to start with, so no one gets hurt. Also here, actually, in this specific case, due to the event that is portrayed, the effects of the weather on gameplay can be absolutely devastating. They can pretty much annul gameplay, make it almost impossible to continue in the game as you're just staring at these poor people. You feel bad for them as they're struggling with this horrendous weather that doesn't really let them do much. I guess that the designer was also aware of that effect the weather can have, not just on the events of the story or the events of the representation, but on gameplay and on how enjoyable or not gameplay can be. The author must have been aware of this, because there's a variant that he suggests that the reader says, ignore the weather. Let's imagine that the storm that took place that day never happened, and so let's just imagine that the weather was cloudy all day. Then you have possibly ways for you to experiment and to enhance playability as opposed, with some detours that you're taking them from historicity. A couple of other things after I praised the order system. Which is great because you can introduce a new player, or you can teach yourself about that idea in wargaming. It's not that it really then, when it comes to gameplay itself, it adds all that much here. Again, because it's about get as fast as possible to those locations and attack as hard as possible, or get as fast as possible and sit there as tightly as possible. And maybe, try to intercept the opponents. But there aren't supply lines, so it's not so much about creative maneuvers. It's really about putting together a massive defense, or as massive as you can, and on the other hand, on concentrating powerful attacks and trying to dislodge the opponent. So in most cases, with the advance attack, with the advance order, and with the maneuver order, just to get there, and then of course you have also the attack order, you're pretty much set. As the Austrian player, you will use a lot of the maneuver to bring your reinforcements and defense for people that are there, and then once you switch to defense, you ideally will not want to do much else. As the French player, you will start from maneuver or advance, and then switch to attack. And again, as soon as you will want to switch to defense, but of course things may go in a variety of ways. It just feels in a certain sense that the order system is solid, it's fine, but it's a little obvious which order you should select in each given situation. It's pretty obvious, and precisely because of that, it's good because it's simple to use, but it's not particularly engaging, it's not particularly exciting. I never felt it was I had this grueling sense of like, which order should I give next? Or this idea, or this situation that sometimes happen at the games that I'm almost, if not literally, yelling at people, what are you doing? Stop advancing! I never felt that, what was at stake because a unit wasn't following the order that they wanted to give them wasn't all that much. It didn't get the sense that the game could hinge on a couple of units advancing where they should maneuvering, or defensing, or being defense when they should be attacking. So it just felt a little bit not... it was appropriate to the situation, but the situation is not one that allows an order system to really be all that exciting. Again, it's a small engagement, it feels fairly linear, attack versus defense, ideally with the switching of the look of the two roles if the French managed to take enough ground, but not so much. Gameplay is fairly linear, is fairly limited in terms of possibilities, which again is great if great, or at least is okay if you know what to expect. It is a magazine game. It comes with a nice magazine that is not just in Italian, but is mainly concerned about Italian things, which of course doesn't have to be. You have, say, French magazines that are not just about French gameplay, but this one is about Italians playing games, Italian events, Italian games, Italian designers, etc., etc. It's great, but it's very specialized, so not everybody might be interested. I like it. I like the magazines, and to me, having that game, although it has limited replay value and fairly basic gameplay, is a nice bonus. But again, I don't know that it will be for everybody. Anyways, if you are a Napoleonic nut, if you are a completionist, then this is another game that you may want to add to your collection. It is a way, in any case, to explore an event that is not covered in many other war games. But again, know what to expect. Know what to expect, and you will never be disappointed. Caldiero 1796 on the as part of the latest issue, number 2 of the Italian magazine Parabellum.